Hello and welcome to another instalment of History Hack. Alina, who have we got with us today?
We've got with us Mariana Flavila, who is an archaeologist and research fellow at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Welcome, Mariana. Hi.
Hi, welcome, girls. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Are you currently in Mexico City?
Yeah, I am here in Mexico City
We
in
are
lockdown.
very jealous. Are you locked down there as well?
Yeah, totally, completely. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I read that Mexico is nearly as bad as the UK, isn't it? It suddenly got very bad in Mexico.
Probably in Mexico City, because of the high demography. Yeah. But not all around the country. No.
Well, fingers crossed we are all out of lockdown soon.
Yeah.
But we are here today to talk to you. You specialise in Mesoamerican studies, especially in navigation, don't you?
Yeah, I've been doing research on that topic for the last 10 years, actually. It's more like a topic related to maritime archaeology, but maritime archaeology is a tradition that hasn't been really evolved here in Mexico. What we do is more like underwater archaeology, which sometimes lacks this theoretical frame, which the maritime archaeology has.
So, first of all, I guess then, can you tell us about the pre-Hispanic navigation traditions in Central America?
Well, yeah, so basically this pre-Hispanic navigation tradition refers to all the technological assemblages and complex social organization related to the movement through water by using some type of nautical technology. Specifically in the vast territories that were conquered by the Spaniards in the 16th century. And this includes the cultural area known as Mesoamerica, which covers a large part or area including the central part of modern Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, which is really close to the Caribbean, and the southwest of Mexico in some modern states such as Oaxaca, as well as Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. So this activity actually can be conceived as part of the process of building a cultural landscape. And well, cultural landscape is like a concept that I use from cultural geography and historical geography. And we could also say that this kind of activity or understand this activity as the deployment of various strategies that made it possible to control a vast biogeographical and cultural space through movement by both water and land. It works simultaneously with terrestrial paths, and because not all the single sections of the rivers basically rivers could be navigated. It includes when we study this practice, it includes the aquatic routes, the architecture associated to certain places, the nautical technology, the specialized knowledge of the people engaged in this activity, and also myths, rituals, and even warfare.
This sounds brilliant. Can I ask you, so up to Spanish, so that's when the Spanish arrive in the 1500s, when do your studies start? What's the beginning of the period you look at?
That's a tricky question because, I've been doing this research in 3 different places and let's say like periods. The first one was focused on the central highland of Mexico in what is today Mexico City, where there used to be a huge 5 lakes and where the Aztecs actually established their capital. And in the post-classic period, which is between 1200 and 1519 after Christ, there was a very important nautical tradition in the lake. So that is one of the studies that I made like 10 years ago. And then I moved to the east coast of Mexico in the cultural area where the Olmecs inhabited. This would be something around 1500 before Christ. Yeah.
I love that you jump around geographically and that you look at different places because it must be really interesting. How does it differ in the Pacific to the Atlantic, and what archaeological evidence do you deal with?
Well, yeah, as I was saying, I've been going through from the center of Mexico to the east and then to the west, right? So this has allowed me to probably have a better idea of precisely how, which are the characteristics that are that are present in all these different territories. And what we have is that there is basically two types of nautical technology. One is the dugout canoes, and the other one is the raft.
Yeah.
And we can find both of them from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and even in the peninsula Yucatan, which is in the east. And relating to the differences, well, the materials used to construct these vessels, it varies from each region, right? But the shape is basically the same. And we also need, this is a working process. I mean, there is a lot of research that needs to be done yet in order to really understand the difference.
I was going to say, do you see them swapping technology as well from one region to another?
Well, the thing is that, and also related to the other question, we only have 4 dugout canoes from pre-Hispanic times, only 4. So there is not really a lot of archaeological evidence, and I don't think it's because it doesn't exist. It's because we haven't really looked for them, in specific places. And one was recovered in Mexico City in the second half of 20th century. 2 more were recovered from the south of modern Veracruz, really close to the seashore and associated to an important river. And 1 more was found in Belize, which is probably Mayan. And apart from that, we have a lot. Okay, this is important. When I started studying all these topics, my supervisors told me, "But what are you going to do with so few examples of archaeological evidence?" And the thing is that you have to actually see many other kinds of evidences, and I found hundreds of representations of canoes in codices, codex, these ancient painted books that the indigenous people created, and in ceramic vessels, objects, mural paintings, etc. So it has been a process of making myself more interdisciplinary,
Yeah, it's turned out really well because you've had to be so diverse in where you've gone for your sources.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the kind of history we call it. I don't know how it translates in Spanish, but we call them rabbit holes, where you're a historian and you get obsessed with one little thing and how it works, and you can't find the answer, so you just spend your life digging down this really crazy topic. And it sounds like you found your rabbit hole.
Yeah, I did. And I love it.
Yeah.
It is. And how you're looking more at the wider context rather than just something so specific.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to understand, this tradition is not just, wasn't just present in ancient Mesoamerica. It was something that was present in the north, in the United States, the current territory of the United States, Central America, and South America also. So, in my case, I don't pretend to really understand how it worked all along through all the continents, but at least in Mesoamerica, which is the territory where I work.
Yeah.
I want to understand in a more general scope how this tradition works.
So if I've been to Lake Titicaca in Peru and I have seen the traditional boats and canoes that they make from the reeds, we went out and saw, the people that live on the rafts made from reeds. We went and saw them. Is it a similar kind of tradition down there as it is up in your area as well?
No, I think it's completely different, actually. That is very interesting because it's completely different. And there has been many research also focus on trying to identify if seafarers from Ecuador and probably Peru arrived to the Pacific coast of Mexico. And we have historical accounts that actually talked about seafarers that are coming from the south, and that they had to stay in certain places for 6 months until they could go back to their original place. But we don't really know who these people is, basically. And so we do have different types of vessels here, but the kind of vessels that they have in Bolivia and in Peru is extremely different from what we have here.
So what do you find in your lakes and rivers then, in your area?
Yeah, well, so that is a very interesting question because many of the studies of the previous studies were focused on the Mayan area, in the Caribbean and the peninsula of Yucatan. And actually, they have been described, the ancient Mayans as the Phoenicians of the New World. But then I realized that this tradition wasn't just practiced, or this activity wasn't just practiced in the sea or the coastline. It was also practiced in lakes and rivers. And the best examples that we have here in Mesoamerica is precisely the central highland lakes where the Aztecs and all the surrounding people lived. It was they created an island, and they were surrounded by water, and they had to create all this nautical technology and system in order to actually deploy all the control of this lake. And we also have the other example, which is the Tarascos from Michoacan, which is one of the groups that weren't able, the Aztecs were not able to conquer them, and they also lived in a lake, and they also had this very important and complex tradition of navigation, and it's like an aquatic way of life. That it's in these indigenous societies, rivers, lakes, and the ocean were conceived as interconnected. That is also very important. So they could move through rivers in direction to the ocean, and probably just move from one place to another. Everything was important.
So are any of your traditions that you look at in your work tied to religion?
Well, yeah, that is a complex question, but it's one of the most interesting ones.
We love a complex question. Please go for
it. Yeah, so basically what we have among the Mayan, about the Maya and the Aztec, the Nahua societies from the Central Highland, there are some myths, like some stories that explain some natural phenomena. For example, the movement of the sun, right, in the sky. And there are myths that establish an analogy with this movement and navigation. So the sun would be somehow a god navigating through the sky in a canoe that at the same time has like some symbolic symbols and some, also some kind of values, that are more like cosmogonic and from the cosmovision of these people. And there were also rituals practiced in the lake. For example, here in Mexico, in what was the lake around the capital of Tenochtitlan, there was a place where they would go with the canoes and then offer, many things among objects and people, and also even canoes were offered to this place in the lake. So we have myths, we have basically rituals that are written and were witnessed by the Spaniards when they arrived here, and that is basically what we have. The myths are not just what I told you. There are also many myths that talk about the arrival of the first people to this land and how they actually came out from an island and navigated through a water body, which we don't know what it was, and then arrived here and established the capital or whatever. Yeah.
Brilliant. Does the landscape of Central America make it more difficult than in other regions?
Yeah, that is a great question. There is something that we must consider. The wheel was known here, but it wasn't used to transport to transport anything, as in many other places in the ancient world. And so one of the huge questions for archaeologists and historians here in Mexico has been why these indigenous people didn't use the wheel to create, transport technologies. And I believe that one of the answers has to do with topography, precisely, with topography and the landscape, how the landscape is shaped here in Mexico. We have a really huge diversity of ecosystems and topography. So probably it was easier to just walk and also to navigate through some of these rivers. Yeah.
And I'm thinking like the Costa Rican rainforest, for example, is you can't drive through it. It doesn't matter if you have a wheel. It's not going to get you very far, is it?
Exactly. Yeah. And even, the Spaniards, Hernán Cortés, the conqueror, when he was traveling through one part of the southeast of Mexico, he mentions in his letters that they couldn't move walking. They had to navigate through the rivers because that was the only way to move through that place.
I'm really interested to know what kind of technology then developed in that region, because if you don't need the wheel, technology still advances, doesn't it? People still think and invent.
Yeah, so that is very interesting. What we have is basically, like these dugout canoes that are shaped from from a tree, and they probably had various sizes, but the shape is not very complex, but it's really efficient, and they could actually support like even probably 4 tons of weight, which is a lot. It's a lot, and we don't have as many archaeological evidences as we wish. What we do have is all these different descriptions of how these were made, which trees were used, how big they were, how small they were, and we also have the information about warfare vessels, and these vessels were used primarily here in central Mexico, in the lake. And it wasn't very complex, but it has some serious technological improvements that allow to protect the people inside the canoe from the attacks from people outside the canoe, Yeah, so it's been really hard because, we don't have the vessels that maybe you can see in many other ancient places in the world, like Egypt probably, or China or whatever. But what we do have is that this pre-Hispanic navigation tradition was really important and really had very serious implications in the process of complexity of the Mesoamerican society. That is really something.
Someone gave me the opportunity in Egypt to see the pharaonic boat that's by the pyramids. And I was walking to look at it and I had the exact money in my hand. But then a guy said, if you give me that money, I will let you take a picture of me kissing my camel. And I did. So I didn't go and look at the boat because the photo is hilarious, to be fair.
I think I'd take the camel over the boat too. Sorry, I'm really sorry.
Alcohol was involved, but like literally, and it's with tongues as well. It's hilarious. But and now I look back, I'm like, what the hell were you doing? You had like a 5,000-year-old boat right there, and you I think alcohol was involved.
Well, it happens.
There is alcohol. I'm not a boaty person, so go for it. Go mock me. It's fine.
Okay, yeah, Alina, go on with that next question.
Yeah, go for it. How does the navigation tradition vary from region to region? I mean, what are the biggest differences you see?
We don't, I'm not really, we don't have enough information for that. What I would say is that it's important to emphasize that even in the Mayan area, for example, in the peninsula of Yucatan, navigation was very important to commerce, to commerce around the whole peninsula. And probably what I'm still trying to understand is which were like the different materials, because we don't really have like more than the sometimes ethnographic data talking about the different types of trees used to construct, the dugout canoes, or the even rituals to construct, because there were only also rituals. So I would say that it varies from region to region according to the landscape, right? According to the trees that were available to construct these dugout canoes. But apart from that, what we see is really a more like, at this point of the research, not extremely homogeneous, like it's not the same everywhere, but it was used for the same kind of activities, probably warfare, commercial purposes, move things from one place to another, move people from one place to another, and in rituals. So that is something that I find in the Mayan area, in the Mexican lakes, in the central Mexican lakes, and in the Pacific part of the Mesoamerica also. I don't know if that answers the question.
It's so difficult, isn't it, in that all of these American, both Central and sort of South American traditions, and even North American, before you get migration come in, they don't have written sources, do they? Or written sources that we necessarily understand. I know that the Incas have got all those coloured threads with the knots in, and nobody gets what it's about. So it's not traditions that have passed down that would give us huge piles of source material, is it?
Yeah, exactly. That is a problem. But the other part is that we do have a lot of stories and news from the first Spaniards that arrived to this place.
This is the thing, isn't it? So then the Spaniards, I'm trying not to say, but then the Spaniards come and bring written history, and yay, because they also bring syphilis and plague and brutality and horrible things. But you must see a big upturn in what is available to you when the conquest happens.
Yeah, completely, because it's really interesting to read how they were actually very surprised for this nautical technology, They actually repeat a lot. Oh, these vessels are so much better than the ones that we have,
It's like this hypocritical Western view, wow, they're not just dumb indigenous people.
And they actually say they are faster, they weigh less, they are easy to carry, and they actually start hiring. They hire people to move merchandise and objects and products through smuggling, they hire canoes, people that moves objects in the canoes, and then the king has to actually stop this activity because the smuggling becomes a really hard problem,
So Mariana, you have some absolutely insane sources. I mean, what is your favorite source that you found to date in your research?
I would say one of the sources that I love to read is actually the diaries from the first religious people that came from Spain to evangelize the indigenous people. These people were actually traveling through all the territory of the New Spain, and so they had to move from one place to another, and they actually have many descriptions precisely of this nautical technology and how it worked and through which rivers they were sailing and whatever. And it's really fun sometimes to actually read what they are saying, because they are like, oh my God, if you pull out an arm out of the canoe, a crocodile would arrive and eat you immediately. So they have these amazing accounts, these amazing stories of their own experiences in using this technology, this nautical technology. One of my favorite sources are maps actually, historical maps, because even sometimes you have the vessels depicted, in these really early historical maps from the New Spain, and sometimes you have to actually find certain things in these maps that actually talk about this activity, certain connections among the rivers and places, or certain symbols that may be implying that navigation was important too. So that is trickier, it's more difficult, but it's really interesting. It's really fun.
Is there anything we've missed that we should talk about?
To mention that one of the interpretations that I have been working on for the last few years
Mm.
relates to another analogy among these vessels and the mainland in the Mesoamerican cosmovision. I'm going to explain this. In the Mesoamerican cosmovision, the mainland was conceived as a reptile, as a turtle or either as some kind of crocodile.
Yeah.
And it received different names from one place to another. From the central Mexico, the name of this monster, which is this creature, was Zipactli. And the name for this creature in the Mayan area was Itzapna. And I already knew this before, well, it's something that I knew, but then I started to find depictions of these canoes with symbols associated to these two monsters, to these two creatures, vessels depicted with the head of Itzapna, for example. And this was really weird because I said, why would they be depicting these canoes in this way? What does it mean? Once I started to dig, to research more, and I had to go to these places, and interview people actually, and talk with modern people, and these analogies were also present in the modern days. So at the end, my conclusion from this phenomenon, from this problem, is that probably the canoes, basically the canoes, were conceived as a replica in miniature from the mainland, or an extension from the mainland that would allow the people to actually navigate safely through these water bodies. And it may have many more connotations behind it, but at least at this point, I understand that there is some analogical and replicant reasoning behind these depictions. I thought that was important to mention.
Mariana, thank you so much for joining us. That was absolutely fantastic, because we've been lacking history in this area, and archaeology especially in this area. So it's been absolutely fantastic having you on board talking all about this for us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was really great to talk to you.
Join us tomorrow when we will be joined by Eldon Yellowhorn of the First Nations Piikani tribe. We are going to be talking all about First Nations first contact. We're going to be looking at one particular guy who worked for the Hudson Bay Company and his experiences on meeting the Blackfoot and the Cree. So don't miss out on that one.